As mayor of the Laconia City Council due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis, and in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All council members have the ability to communicate during this meeting through the Zoom platform, and the public has access to watch the live YouTube video at https://www.youtube.com/LaconiaNH. Listen to this meeting through dialing the following phone number: 1-646-558-8656, or participate by the Zoom app, webinar ID 876-9884-8972, with a password of 450108. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public on how to access the meeting using Zoom, and instructions are provided on the City of Laconia's website at www.laconianh.gov. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem, please call 524-3877, extension 249, or email at cityclerk@laconianh.gov. And D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states his presence, also please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I'd ask the city clerk, Cheryl Hebert, to call the order.
Councilor Cheney,
Here.
physically present. Councilor Susie.
Here. No one's in the room.
Thank you. Councilor Littman.
I'm present and no one's in the room.
Councilor Haynes.
Physically present.
Councilor Hamel.
Present, nobody in the room.
Councilor Felch.
Here and alone.
Thank you. Mayor Hosmer.
Physically present in the chambers. Thank you. Prior to going any farther, I'd like to salute the flag. I'd ask Councilor Haynes to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Councilor Haynes. Joined at the council table this evening is the previously mentioned City Clerk Cheryl Hebert, Scott Myers, City Manager, and we will move along to item number 7, acceptance of minutes from the previous meetings. 7A, which is our special meeting minutes of July 27, 2020. Minutes of the meeting were distributed to the City Council on Thursday, July 30th, 2020 by Cheryl Hebert, City Clerk, with 2 corrections submitted to the clerk. The minutes were redistributed on Friday, July 31st, 2020. The minutes will be accepted as redistributed. Forgot to mention Glenn Smith is here handling our IT duties, Finance Manager. Thank you very much. Number 7B is the regular meeting minutes of July 27, 2020. Minutes of the meeting were distributed to the City Council on Thursday, July 30th, 2020 by Cheryl Hebert, the City Clerk, with no corrections or changes submitted to the clerk. The minutes will be accepted as distributed. Again, job well done, Cheryl Hebert. Moving on to we have no consent and action items. Moving on to number 9 on the agenda, it is an opportunity for citizen comments for matters not on the agenda. So citizens who are listening in, if you have something you'd like to inform the council of and it's not on tonight's agenda, please raise your hand or let us know that you're there and we'll call on you. Seeing no requests to speak tonight, we'll move on to number 10 under interviews. And I'd like to call, I guess, to the podium, Pamela Clark, seeking appointment as a regular member of the Historic District Commission. On December 9th, 2019, the City Council approved an ordinance creating a Historic District Commission to consist of 5 regular members and up to 2 alternate members to serve for initial staggered 3-year terms. Of the 5 regular members, 1 is to be a city councilor and the other a planning board member, resulting in 3 regular member terms, and up to 2 alternate member terms available to the public. Ms. Clark was out of state and unable to be present at the council's March 9th meeting when interviews for most of the candidates to this commission were conducted. Appointment or reappointment to various boards and commissions will be made at the council's August 24th, 2020 meeting. And Ms. Clark's application is attached. So welcome. It's nice to have you. If you could introduce yourself a little bit, Pam, and let us know why you'd like to serve.
All right, well, good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. I got to take these off.
Yeah.
Sorry I was out of state when you were interviewing everyone else, but I heard there were a lot of really good candidates, so I was very pleased about that. Most of you who know me know that I'm very passionate about the history of Laconia. And in my application, I actually did something wrong, which I reviewed this morning and saw that, well, on it, I was chairman of the Heritage Commission for 9 years, and it said that I've been president of the Historical Society for 4. Well, it's actually been 7. I'm in my 7th year. I know. I don't know where the other 3 years went, but it's been 7 years. And the reason I'm applying is because I feel that the Laconia Historical and Museum Societies would be a benefit to the Historic District Commission. You know, we would have knowledge and help that I think would be very beneficial. I don't necessarily need to be a regular member. I could be an alternate member, but I do believe that the Historical Society should be represented on the Historic District Commission. Questions?
Pam, thank you for your willingness to serve your city. Councilors, do you have any questions for Ms. Clark? Sorry, I was muted if you couldn't hear me. I'm unmuted now. Councilor Haynes.
Yeah. As we move forward, do you see the historic? You can't. As time moves forward, do you see the historic district enlarging?
Oh, most certainly. Yes. There are many historical buildings in the city, and I mean, we've got Lakeport and the Weirs to consider as well.
So there's plenty of work to be done.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you for coming forward.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Haynes. Any other questions of Ms. Clark? Councilor Hamill.
Yes, thank you. I've known Pam for a long, long time, and I want to thank her for everything she's done and dedicated her time and volunteerism for the city. I guess some of my questions would be, Pam, and that goes along with Mark. What areas do you consider in a city historic that you'd be looking to put in a historic district?
Well, a lot of downtown Laconia is very historic, so I'd like to enlarge the area that we have right now. And then, like I said, in Lakeport. We've got the Opera House and goes up to Goss Reading Room. And I'm sure there's other areas there as well. And then the Weirs, the Veterans Association, and, you know, the Methodist campground. So there are other areas.
Okay. The reason why I asked that is, you know, just because the building is old, you know, it may not have a real historic value. I mean, my house is built in 1930s and it's historic to me, but nobody else, I don't think. So, you know, what kind of bothered me with this whole thing to begin with is I hate to impose restrictions on people buying homes in an area where they gotta come running to people to change a doorknob or a color or a tree,
And-
something like
and
that.
That's not what the historic district was formed to do at all.
That's all in there. It's all part of,
And I don't think the areas that I'm looking at, I'm not seeing a lot of regular homes that would be an issue with.
okay. And I guess my other question is, when it comes to picking areas and things like this, personal biases on particular buildings or things like that, you wouldn't have a problem with that, correct?
No, 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 I need to be impartial, yes.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. All right, great. Thank you, Pam, for stepping forward to do this. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Hamel. Any other questions from councilors? Seeing none, thank you very much, Pam. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I understand that you're voting on the next council meeting.
On the 24th, yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving right along here, there are no nominations, appointments, or elections, communications, public hearings. We're coming along to number 15, which is the mayor's report. I would just like to indulge the listeners, if you can indulge me for just a moment. And I'm sure that each councilors may have something to add to this at the appropriate time during tonight's meeting, but we are now just a couple weeks out from what has been a rescheduled Laconia Motorcycle Week, and we're watching what's going on around the country, both in relation to the pandemic, as well as keeping an eye on what's going on in Sturgis, South Dakota, and just sort of gauging what's happening and how we should be preparing for the next couple of weeks. I will say that the city manager and I have been on calls, and I know I've said this before, on a call with the state, both the director of public health from DHHS, the commissioner of BEA, members of the governor's staff. We've had conversations with the Partnership for Public Health, as well as certainly Chief Canfield, Chief Beati, and we've had good communications with Lakes Region General Hospital in preparing for what is ahead of us now. We thought all of these groups were stakeholders and had something to offer during this period in time. And it wasn't specifically, perhaps we organized specifically in regards to Motorcycle Week and how the city would approach this, but really it's taken on a broader context in that we've had a very busy summer here on our beaches and our streets, and we have had an awful lot of visitors to the state, as we've all seen. So how are we going to respond to people traveling from some distance around New England and probably points even farther away? And how are we going to handle the influx of tourists? So we've prepared for that. And as most people know, and certainly as the council knows, there were limitations put on how many people we could have at Weirs Beach, both in the parking lot and on the beach itself. We are still under some advisories from the governor as to capacity of public venues, restaurants, and such. So we're still very cautious as we approach the end of the summer in relation to the pandemic. And we've received an awful lot of emails from people who have grave concerns about Laconia Motorcycle Week continuing. And I think all of us as counselors and in the city share those concerns as well. And it was with that in mind that we decided that the city would not be participating at all in Laconia Motorcycle Week this year, 2020. It will take place in name only. We will stay on track for the 100th anniversary of Laconia Motorcycle Week on 2023, which is particularly important to the association. But I just want to let the public know really what we've done and not done this year as opposed to other years in preparation for this in anticipation of keeping the public safe, which is certainly our number one priority here. And I think a second priority for us too is not unduly impacting some of the local businesses that have suffered during the course of this pandemic and this economic downturn. Certainly with a limited season for our travel and tourism businesses in the area, it was also critically important that they sort of get back up on their feet and start generating some revenue. And that was important to all of us in the city as well. But I'd like to just let people know that over the past few weeks, since we've made this decision, we've denied application for fireworks during that week. We have denied application for outdoor music, if I'm not mistaken. Laconia, and this is a significant thing, will not be issuing vendor permits. Most people are aware, and certainly if it may perhaps had some experience on Lakeside Avenue, that is the chief gathering point during Laconia Motorcycle Week, and quite of the gathering takes place around the vendors that are there that are selling their commemorative items and motorcycle paraphernalia. That will not be the case this year, as we will be not offering any vendor permits. So those vendors are not coming this year. We've also made a decision that there'll be no center line parking. As many people know, the center line parking is an opportunity for the motorcycles to park in the center of Lakeside Avenue. With people moving up on both sides of the street, it becomes a spot for congregating, socializing, shopping, having some food and beverage as well. This year, based on conversations with the fire department as well as the police department and the city manager, there will be two-way traffic there as well. Obviously, as I stated earlier, there's limited entry into Weirs Beach. There will be only 3 smaller tents on Lakeside Avenue, one of them being the Laconia Motorcycle Week Association, where they traditionally set up a tent, and there'll be 2 nonprofits selling some raffle tickets or perhaps some paraphernalia. Those will be really very small tents, not particularly disruptive and not particularly a magnet for people to be attracted to Lakeside Avenue. The Laconia Motorcycle Week has taken the steps of doing a deep clean on Lakeside Avenue of all public places that may come into contact with people, which is they've done that at their own expense, which is greatly appreciated. Laconia Motorcycle Week, in conjunction with some of their vendors or supporters on years past, have assured us that there are going to be a number of sanitation stations, places for people to wash their hands, and which is a significant factor in controlling the spread of any virus. As we know, the state has a recommendation of a 14-day quarantine if you're traveling from outside of New England. And if I'm not mistaken, Scott, that's extended to New York and New Jersey? Okay, so if you're traveling from New York and New Jersey, you don't have to quarantine. It's not recommended you quarantine. Correct. Okay, so that was just extended. So there still is a recommendation for quarantine for 14 days. We have partnered with Commissioner Caswell at the Business and Economic Affairs Department of the state to build a social media campaign, telling people and reminding people that social distancing is critically important to controlling the spread of this virus, that hygiene, keeping hands washed, of course, away from faces, is critically important, and also the use of masks, which is not mandatory in this state, but it is highly recommended that would be the first step in taking some degree of responsibility for ourselves and doing our part to make sure that the virus doesn't spread. So we have what I think is a fairly robust communication program. I've also been informed in talking with folks at the state that liquor enforcement will be here and actively holding restaurants and other licensed gathering spots to strict occupancy restrictions. If I'm not mistaken, we're at 50% now. Is that correct in this area? For inside seating, we are at 50%. And that is something that the state will be closely monitoring, which I think is particularly helpful. We anticipate certainly that this week that is celebrating the 97th Annual Motorcycle Week won't be any different than the busy weekends that we've already experienced and seemingly have managed pretty well up until this point. So, but I think it's important from my personal perspective that mask use should be our first line of defense when social distancing is not possible. And I really, and again, this is personal. This is not coming from, this is not a statement from the entire council, but I think our businesses, our local businesses must lead. Really, only when we get the pandemic under control, it's really the first step in reinvigorating our economy to effectively combat this pandemic. So hand washing, social distancing, and mask wearing, these are really our social responsibilities. And I anticipate that, and I hope that when people come to visit our city, either to drive through or to go on a charity ride or to fuel up their motorcycles, I hope they abide by this. I hope they take this responsibility very seriously so that we can continue to celebrate this in the fashion that we are accustomed to on the 98th Motorcycle Week celebration next year. So that would conclude my remarks this evening. I would like to move along to, just one item here as far as, Scott, I think I'd like to just talk about Councilor Susie taking over the spots for Councilor Bounds. So Councilor Susie, thank you for joining us for your first official meeting. It is great to have you. Certainly an impressive history of the work you've done in this city and the commitment you've had to our community, and it's you strengthen this council, so thank you. I would like to, Scott, appoint Councilor Susie to the positions that Councilor Bounds occupied and appoint him to as a liaison to the Water Commission this evening. I don't have all of David's liaison responsibilities, but perhaps this week we can get something out to Councilor Susie just so he knows what his responsibilities are.
Thank you.
Let me also just for a clarification point, we may be at, I may have to ask for some research on this. We may be at 100% capacity in indoor seating in Belknap County. I may have made that mistake. I think it's the counties farther south that might be at 50%.
I think you're correct, and I nodded in agreement at 50. So it is 100%, but it still means that tables need to be distanced at 6 feet or further. So there, even though 100% inside, you still have limitations based on the number of tables that can be separated.
Yes. Okay. Thanks. Thanks for that clarification. Yes. Councilor Lippman. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a couple questions on your report. Is it also true that there's also been restrictions on issuing permits and things in area communities around us? Is that your understanding?
Yes, that's my understanding. I may defer to the city manager, but I know there was some of that discussion in Meredith, and I believe they have placed some restrictions on their community during that time period. It's a good question.
Yeah, I can't speak to that 100%. Of the Meredith in particular issuing no vending licenses. I do know Harley Davidson, Laconia Harley Davidson and Meredith that originally planned on having a number of vendors and entertainments and food options, I believe, and pretty much a normal motorcycle week for them in their parking lot doing the demo rides. I know they have scaled that way back where they're going to be open, but they're not doing any of the vending. I also received a press release from the New Hampshire Motor Speedway late last week that I did forward to all of you that basically said while there were some races going on at the Speedway, they also were not having vendors and other similar type of activities. So again, scaled back there as well. I think in the most recent years, whatever may have gone on in Guilford over near the airport by the movie cinema parking lot has been, for the most part, I believe, non-existent. So I'm not expecting anything happening over there, although I don't know that 100%.
I just, in terms of thank you for adding that in, City Manager Myers, I just think it's important to understand some of the images that people may have seen in South Dakota. Our event, if you will, is structured as more as a statewide event. You know, witness what's going on in Loudon and races around. So it's, I think there are some vast differences that between what's going on in South Dakota and what's supposed to happen in New Hampshire.
Thank you, Councilor Littman, and though I've never been to Sturgis, it seems to be centralized far more than it is in our statewide celebration of motorcycles. And, you know, I think in some respects, the idea of getting out and riding through our great state is a great way to social distance and enjoy yourself and help our economy a little bit. So thank you. Any other questions from councilors? Okay, thank you very much. Seeing none, I'll move along to committee reports. We're looking for any committee reports. And I'll wait to see a hand raise. If someone has something to report. Seeing none right at this moment, I'll move on to liaison reports. Any liaison reports? Okay, very good. Move right along to number 18 right now, which is citizens' request to comment on current agenda items. Citizens, if you are listening or watching and there's something on tonight's agenda you'd like to speak to, please raise your hand and now's your opportunity. Mr. D'Amatos, welcome aboard.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. I just wanted to urge the council to please allow the WIS Action Committee to utilize the Endicott Rock parking lot for the annual fundraiser. The WIS Action Committee will operate the lot in a responsible manner, wearing masks, social distancing, and all the rules that are applied. The WIS Action Committee performs many functions and many beautification projects, including street banners, flower pots, trash containers, the list goes on. It saves the city countless dollars in the city budget due to the funds that they raise and expend on Lakeside Avenue in the Weirs Beach area. Dues charged members does not come close to the amount of income to the organization that is raised from the parking lot fundraiser, and it would be extremely detrimental not to have that income. Once again, I ask you to please allow the WIS Action Committee to have their major fundraiser utilizing the Endicott Rock parking lot, and I thank Councilor Cheney for putting this issue on the agenda tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. D'Amatos. I greatly appreciate your input. Good evening, Mr. Ames. Welcome.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
So I wanted to also comment about Weirs Action Committee being able to use the Endicott Rock parking lot. We received an email from City Manager Myers that the reason that we were not going to be allowed to use the lot was because it would encourage added capacity to the event. We have always parked cars and bikes at this lot, so we don't see how us using the lot is going to encourage added capacity in any way. It's always been first come, first served. So if there are a lot of cars that came down into the lot, we would park them first. There would not be extra capacity for motorcycles. the city is not going to close the lot from our understanding. So the lot is going to be used by cars and motorcycles, whether WAC is able to fundraise or not. So we don't really see how there's any impact whatsoever on capacity. All the other lots in the area, then there are a lot of private lots in that immediate surrounding area, including at the drive-in, at the former Pharaohs, at the Boardwalk Bar and Grill, and across the street from there. All of those private parking lots can park cars or bikes however they please. And so we also feel that due to the things that are going, that the way that the city has managed this event, that it's not going to be as busy as a normal motorcycle week. So we don't think that there'll be any over parking at the Endicott Rock Park like we would usually see on a very, very busy motorcycle week on a Saturday. So those are the reasons that we think that we should be allowed to go ahead. It's critically important to the finances of Weirs Action Committee that we operate this fundraiser. We haven't been able to even raise our funds in a normal manner this summer at all, so it's just critical. I think that summarizes my points.
Mr. Ames, thank you very much for your thoughts this evening. Greatly appreciated, and certainly appreciate the work that the Weirs Action Committee does. Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Excuse me. Okay, thank you very much. So we'd like to move along to number 19, which is the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we do not have a financial and operational trends report in your packet this week due to some staff time off last week and timing of some other things. It would have been a very thin report, so we will get that out to you as part of your next agenda and get you caught up on those trends. Just looking, generally speaking, at numbers, there's nothing that jumps out at us. We're basically just started the second month of the fiscal year, so we're very early on most of the numbers anyway for any trends, and we'll get you caught up in 2 weeks. Just to follow up on the question that Ms. Clark raised about the appointments. So it was mentioned that all of the interviews that were held during that first meeting in March before the world changed and we went Zoom and not having people in the building, all those appointments were going to be handled at the next meeting on August 24th. And then it's our intent to get you back on track with interviews on the first meeting of the month. Hopefully those who want to, we can do them in person. Those who want to do Zoom, we'll do a Zoom. And we will get the appointments of the elections at the second meeting of the month. So we'll get back on track. Anybody who had a term who was expired, as long as they hadn't been replaced, was able to continue to serve in the capacity. So none of our boards and commissions were impacted as far as that goes. The city will be having a press briefing that we haven't done in a while this Wednesday at 10 o'clock. The link is through the Lakes Region Public Access TV. It went out in Friday's Laconia links. It's also posted right on the homepage of our website. And so you can either live stream it or then it'll be available for broadcast afterwards. It'll include Mayor Hosmer, Chief Canfield, Chief Piatti, and myself, and Superintendent of Schools, Steve Tucker. So talking about things about school reopening, what that looks like, some of the changes the mayor touched upon tonight, Motorcycle Week in particular, and a few other items just to continue to try to get accurate information out in the community. So I will stop there and take any questions if anybody has any.
Any questions from the councilors for the city manager at this point? Seeing none.
Mayor, you're muted.
I'm gonna get the hang of this one of these days. Thank you.
We all are.
So under 20A, which is something brought forward by Councilor Felch, our Ward 6 councilor, which is a discussion regarding the limit of trash cans for single-family residences. Councilor Felch requested a discussion regarding the amount of trash cans that are allowed out at a single-family residence. His suggestion is to allow up to 3 trash cans weekly, especially since glass is trash and to take into consideration for larger families. So that is the introduction of the item, and I'll defer to Councillor Felch to weigh in on this if you like.
Yes, as you said, I've had a few complaints about the 2-barrel limit. And there are some families out there, you figure if you got 4, 5, 6 kids, and especially now that glass is trash and you're not in the trash. I know when this was written up, it was back when we were trying to get people to recycle and stuff. So I'd just like to look at maybe having 3 cans instead of 2.
Thank you, Councillor Felch. I think at this point, if I'm not mistaken, we are going to perhaps make a decision whether we'll put this as a formal agenda item at the next meeting. Is that right, Scott?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, before we went ahead and looked to amend it, and then this ordinance would have to be moved to a public hearing, I wanted to make sure that there was consensus amongst the council to look to do this adjustment. And if there is, we can certainly bring the proper language, the proper form to you in 2 weeks for a first reading and go to a public hearing. And obviously, if there was a desire to keep our current solid waste ordinance as it was, then it would kind of end here tonight if there was no desire to change it. So that was our thought process before we went through.
Thank you. So, councilors, I'd be looking to all of you to make a determination as to whether this is an item we'd like to continue to discuss and consider the recommendation that Councillor Felch would like us to. Councillor Cheney, would you like to speak?
Scott, is there anything in our contract with the waste haulers that requires only 2 barrels?
No, there's nothing specific, Counselor, in our contract with Casella for the curbside pickup. When the city was looking to help control solid waste costs a number of years ago, I'll give you a little bit of a background here, but I started with the city 9 years ago last month. And at that time, I came in during the discussion of pay as you throw, where there were conversations about people buying the bags for a certain price and filling them up and having solid waste be treated as a utility, if you will, where the more trash you generated, the more you paid to dispose of it, or the more efficient or the more you recycled, the less it would cost you. And with the single stream having come in, an unlimited single stream, that was a good approach. The council at the time decided to try to find other creative ways, not go as pay as you throw that some people saw as another tax or a fee because they already pay taxes. And how do we encourage recycling? So at that point, we went to what we called mandatory recycling. So if you had recycling out and we didn't see obvious recyclable materials in your solid waste trash, we would pick up and consider you a recycler. We also had the 4 remote locations. I guess there were 3 at the time, but we added a 4th over the years to allow people to dispose of recyclables 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was really an effort to try to control the cost of trash so that we could take those dollars and use them for things that were more beneficial in the city. And that worked very well up until about 2 or 3 years ago when China turned the recycling market upside down by refusing to accept anything that was less than a certain level of purity. And we all know from either seeing it or hearing or reading or pictures that there's a lot of recycling that has materials in it that shouldn't be there, and it lessens the quality. And China for years would accept all materials regardless of contamination or not. And when they tightened that market, a lot of what was coming out of the United States was being rejected, and China was no longer accepting it. Without China as a purchaser of those commodities, if you will, there became no way for for us in the United States, for the most part, to inexpensively dispose of those. And rather than recycling having value, it became really cost prohibitive to get rid of. And there's a time, and even till today, there is a cost to getting rid of recyclables that is based on the commodity market. So how much of a demand is there for mixed paper or corrugated cardboard or the plastics? There seems to be an okay market for the aluminum and some of the metals. Glass, there is not even an opportunity to recycle glass in New England right now. That's why we went with the glass is trash. We see that trend starting to turn where some of the plants and the commercial ventures that took recyclables in the past are starting to come online again right now. And we're hopeful that there will be a domestic market for those materials and that this trend will turn. I would love to see glass no longer be trash and be used somehow, reused, crushed it and used in construction projects or landscaping aggregate or whatever it might be. But right now, truly what was happening with the glass is it's being sorted through the single stream process and it's being taken to the landfill anyway. And we are paying more to dispose of it as a recyclable as we would as trash. So that's the background. It was all in an effort to control cost and try to use those dollars for the betterment of the community in other areas. We do try to provide some common sense and some flexibility around the holidays. So 4th of July weekend, Thanksgiving, the Christmas holiday. We understand people probably generate some extra trash, and we've worked with our haulers to have them, take an extra container or so around those weeks, just because, we know people traditionally have families and gatherings. But at the end of the day, is 2 30-gallon containers someone can have for a single family home. That's 60 gallons. We pick it up weekly. And again, recycling is unlimited. So that's probably a little longer answer than you wanted, but that's the background. We can choose to have our trash hauler pick up unlimited containers if that's our choice. We pay for it by the ton to get rid of it.
Thank you, Scott, for a thorough answer. Councilor Lippman, you're not on mute. Would you like to speak?
Sure. I'm just sort of leveraging off what the manager just talked about. I think in terms of thinking about this long term, I think where we're at is a better place to be. Eventually recycling hopefully does come back, and I think going to 3 eventually is going to cost us more. There is, as in my understanding, manager, that if someone does have extra trash, there's always the opportunity to take it up. If it's not during one of the weeks that you just talked about, there's an opportunity to bring it to the transfer station. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, it is, Councilor.
So I think that we've been playing this as a long run situation, and I would hope that we would continue to do so.
Thank you, Councilor Lippman. Any other input from councilors? Seeing none right now, I'm wondering whether this is ripe to continue for discussion at this time, or whether we should, I don't think we necessarily have to table it, but just perhaps revisit it as the year rolls along, Councilor Felch, and continue to monitor it and see what type of feedback we're getting from folks as well. If there's something mounting here, we can certainly circle back and discuss it again if you like. Go right ahead, Councilor Felch.
Well, I can tell you one thing that's happening with the recycling now is that it's getting contaminated with trash. I know my next door neighbor was still putting glass in his recycling. So it's encouraging that to happen.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Felch. Scott, would you like to reply to that?
Yes, thank you. So glass is still a recyclable. If people have glass in their recycling bin, it doesn't mean we reject your recycling load. If that's a make or break point for some people in order to help keep the trash at the 2 barrels right now, we certainly don't want to promote necessarily at this moment that everybody go and throw their glass back in the recyclables, because it's purely we're paying more to get rid of it and it still ends up in the landfill. But if that truly was a tipping point for what appears to be maybe a couple of handfuls of families across the city, they can put glass. It is a recyclable commodity and it will be picked up in the recycling bin with no problem.
Thank you. That's a clarification I think is helpful to me anyway. I don't know if you can perhaps share that with a constituent, Councilor Felch, if that might be helpful.
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So it seems to me that we don't have a consensus to continue this discussion further, but certainly an opportunity will be presented at future hearings. Moving on to number 20B right now. which is the request from Councilor Felch. It's been a busy 2 weeks for you, Councilor Felch, to designate 3 or 4 parking spots in front of the Opera House in Lakeport on Union Avenue to 15-minute parking. Would you like to introduce that issue, Councilor Felch?
Sure. We've got some businesses there now that's looking great. We got the Wayfarer Coffee Shop, which a lot of people like to stop and just take a coffee to go, or maybe a bite to eat to go. You've also got the Daily Sun, where people might want to stop and just grab a paper, or even go in and pay a bill and come back out. A lot of the spaces are being taken up by people that are there for half an hour. So it'd be more convenient for those businesses to be able to have a couple of 15-minute parking spaces, 3, 4, whatever the council feels would be a good idea.
Thank you, Councilor Felch. And as we know, that's certainly the Opera House and the Wayfarer Coffee in Lakeport has been a tremendous addition to our city, and certainly specifically to Lakeport. Those are 2-hour spaces that sit out in front for the most part there. But you're right, I think most people are getting in there, grabbing a coffee and a bite to eat and moving on. And certainly if we can make it a little more convenient for people to swing in and grab their coffee or do their business at the Laconia Daily Sun or what have you, and sort of a throughput or turnover of spaces might be a wise idea there. I'd look for other councilors for some input. I see Councilor Hamel. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I can support what Tony's bringing forward. You know, the amount of spaces, you know, I'm thinking 2 to 3, no more than 3. But yeah, I could support that. I think it's a good idea. You know, where you know, like he says, go and grab a cup of coffee and leave, as long as they do that. But no, that's good. I like that.
Muted. You're muted, Mayor.
Okay,
Go right ahead.
can you hear me?
I can hear you very well. Welcome.
Thank you. Very much agree with that. From working that area for a few years, when it was back and there was other businesses there in the corners. Totally agree. At least 3 spaces. And 15 minutes is just going to make sure it's enforced. Right, Tony?
Yeah, right.
Terrific. Thank you, Councilor Susie. Any other input from the council on this? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Littman. Go right ahead.
I'm where the other 3 councils are on this. I think it's supportable, and appreciate Councilor Phelps bringing it forward.
Terrific. So that seems like we have 4 councilors who would be interested in continuing this discussion, and I'd ask the city manager to perhaps put this on our agenda for the next meeting and begin the process for opening up to public comment. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councilor Felch, for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you.
Moving right along to number 20C, which is an item we've heard a little, had some input on tonight from the public, which is great, which is a discussion pertaining to fundraising by the Weirs Action Committee during Laconia Motorcycle Week 2020. Councilor Cheney would like to discuss allowing the Weirs Action Committee to use the Endicott Park parking lot to fundraise during the upcoming Laconia Motorcycle Week event. And I'd ask him to lead the discussion on that.
Thank you, Mayor. I was contacted by members of the Weirs Action Committee with regards to their correspondence from the city manager, and asked if I would bring this matter to the council. From my perspective, the Weirs Action Committee does a lot of good, has been a strong force in the Weirs for getting things done, and I hope we can support them this year and allow them to use the parking lot for fundraising. I would point out that the committee has agreed to the idea of both cars and motorcycles, so there isn't any additional number of motorcycles going to be using it than would have if the city was running the lot. And again, this is as far as I know, their one main fundraiser. So I hope we can support, and I'd like to make a motion, if I may, to allow the Weirs Action Committee to use Endicott parking lot during Motorcycle Week for fundraising purposes.
Let's see. So Councilor Cheney has put a motion on the table. Is there a second? Second from Councilor Felch. Further discussion from the council on this issue. Just a question I may have, Scott. What do the numbers look like on this? Can you determine what's usually generated during the typical weekend there? So what the city might be sacrificing, since we're anticipating could be a busy couple of weekends in there or a week, but not necessarily off the charts busy. What would the city be sacrificing in not collecting fees there?
So obviously weather dependent, but I think on average on the weekend days when there's decent weather, just in the Endicott Rock parking lot is probably anywhere from $1,300 a day to $1,500 a day. And that's at $2 an hour with the vehicles in. I may want to look to Councilor Hamel to see if he can affirm this for me, but I know we work with the Weirs Action Committee on two different types of parking. And I agree that during the fireworks events that they do in the last year or two, the city council has allowed them to charge for parking to help support the fireworks on those Wednesdays, I believe it is. It is a mix of cars and motorcycles down there, and they charge a fee. This is where I want Councilor Hamel. I thought during Motorcycle Week, it was just motorcycles. There were no cars down there at all, because again, you're thinking of the timing, it's early to middle June. It's not necessarily beach weather yet. And additionally, they would use the grass area as well. It wasn't just the parking lot area. There were a number of motorcycles laid out on the grass down there, and that's where the capacity issue comes in. So what I heard tonight was it was going to be a mix of cars and motorcycles, which I don't think it ever has been before during Motorcycle Week, and therefore it wouldn't increase capacity. We have gotten financials. The council has asked for them every year. I understand it's a very big fundraiser for the Weirs Action Committee. The 2019 numbers I did look at the other day. They generated $30,000 in gross revenue on a very busy Motorcycle Week with the motorcycles. And again, using the grass for parking. They had about $9,000, I believe, ballpark for some labor expenses. They had some other miscellaneous expenses to do the parking. So I think they netted around $20,000. Again, if you looked at it being just motorcycles and the gross revenue was $30,000, that means you're parking 600 motorcycles a day at $5 a motorcycle, gives you $3,000 a day times a 10-day motorcycle week run. And again, I'm approximating, but those are very close to the numbers that were in the financials they provided us. So just doing the simple math, if you're generating $30,000 by charging $5 a bike, that's 6,000 bikes you're parking over 10 days. So if you are to move forward with this, the city does lose some revenue. I want a clarification that we are allowing cars down there. And I guess I would like to know what the city council wanted to charge for cars, because again, I don't believe there was car parking down there during Motorcycle Week. And then the bigger question is safety. Are we going to allow motorcycles to be parked on the grass when we have people there partaking of the beach? Because now we're in August and it's still beach season and picnicking season. So those are concerns, along with increasing the capacity, because nothing that we have done this year has done anything to increase capacity for vendors or food or entertainment or parking. So that's a staff position for you, if you will.
Councilor Cheney.
Yes, I'm in agreement with the manager's suggestion that we need to know that the Weirs Action Committee will park cars and motorcycles in a mix. I understood them to say they were willing to do that. I think we can, as part of our agreement with them, say that we don't want cars parked on the grass for distancing purposes. But I'd like to see them have an opportunity to collect some money towards their fund drive. I would say to my fellow councilors, if we can support the Nomad Motorcycle Club having a tent on Lakeside Ave, we ought to be able to let Weir's Action Committee do a fundraiser in the parking lot. And so my motion's on the table. Thank you.
Counselor Susie, I see you have your hand raised.
Right. One question to Councilor Cheney, or maybe even to the city manager. Would there be no parking then on the grass? It would just be the parking lot for bikes and cars?
So from my perspective, I think we set that as a condition.
Okay. And I haven't been down there in quite a while, but is the parking lot striped? So it's like there's spaces for cars, and is it 1 or 2 bikes per space, or is it like, I would see the boulevard to be one bike, 1 space?
No, actually, on Lakeside, there could be multiple motorcycles within 1 space. I think if you move forward with this and you limited it to just using the paved area, I think the Weir's Action Committee would lay out a grid. I mean, I know they've got a very detailed plan on how they get the bikes in there right now and maximize the parking for the space that they have. So I think if you indicated that it had to be cars and motorcycles, but it had to stay on the pavement, my feeling is they would look at the available space and design a plan that maximized their opportunities. So that's probably a long way of saying I am very certain it would be on average more than 1 motorcycle per space, because they're there as a fundraiser. They're looking to maximize it, safety and parking obviously factoring into it, but I can tell you they would do more than 1 motorcycle per parking space.
Okay, but they would not turn away cars.
No. It's up to the council to make that stipulation, because again, it's my understanding that on the fireworks nights that they did it, cars could park there. But during motorcycle week, and again, I think Councilor Hamill probably can chime in and let me know if I'm right or if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding, or even Councilor Felch even, but my understanding is that during motorcycle week, that lot was 100% motorcycles and it included the grassy area.
I believe you're right on that, Scott. Walking around there at times during Bike Week, it was pretty much all motorcycles, and they did use the grass area, even over by the river. So yeah, it's pretty much just bicycle motorcycles.
Further discussion, Councilor Littman. You're on mute. Thank you.
I have a concern if there's going to be 600 bikes in there, whether it's on the grass or on the pavement. If we're going to go forward with something like this, I think we got to more narrow the amount of fundraising. I've always been supportive of all the projects we've undertaken in the Weirs, but for $20,000 of revenue, the difference between, just for example, having 1 bike to a space or 2 bikes to a space versus, filling up that lot to raise 20 grand. I'd rather see us come up with that money some other way within the council. I just think that, this capacity issue is a real issue. And, I can't support the motion as it's currently laid out there.
Councilor Cheney, yes.
It would be my position that the parking lot would not be seeing 600 bikes. If we're not allowing parking on the grass, and if we're saying cars as well can be parked there, I think it's beyond probable that the number will be greatly reduced. And it's an opportunity for them to get some funds. I just don't see, if we're gonna collect the funds for the city, and then turn around and find some other way to give the money to the Weirs Action Committee. I don't understand where that's cost effective. I think,
I don't think it's a matter of cost, Counselor. I think it's a matter of the public health situation. And if we want to give the money to the Weirs Action that we would raise during that week as city, I'm okay with that. I just think that, you know, I'm concerned that the congregation of vehicles down there is going to look and end up being not something that we'd be proud of having happen. I'm supportive of the Weirs Action Committee, and you know, to the extent that we can construct something that is reasonable, I'm okay with that, or just give them the revenue that we collect during the normal use of that and just pass it on to the Weirs Action Committee.
I'm sorry, go right ahead. So
I'm sorry, Mayor. I assumed that we were going to set restrictions to see to it that there wouldn't be a packing in of cars or motorcycles. I'm sure that will have an impact on their fundraising, but I agree with you that we don't want to see a capacity crowd in that parking area. If we say 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, motorcycles per space and cars are allowed in there, I think it will keep the number substantially below the 600 they've experienced in the past. And so I hope you can reconsider, Councilor Whitman, and have the manager set restrictions that meet your needs, and I think the needs of all of us, that this not be overwhelmed with motorcycles. Thank you.
I can support that, Councilor Chin.
So if I hear what you're saying is you're suggesting that a reduced capacity within that lot, you'd have the city manager craft something that would allow for reduced capacity. What about the idea of, we're obviously going to impact the Weirs Action Committee, the amount of revenue they'll be taking in. Would there still be an effort to sort of make them whole at some point in the course of the year, to find that money to make them whole based on perhaps what they did last year, so they can continue to invest in that area of the city?
I'd be supportive of that, but to net the difference.
Yeah. So if we had said, so if we reduce capacity, but we offset it with, if we can find some city funds. So Councilor Hamel, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I agree with Henry on this. You know, the whole idea of what we've done right along to make, you know, Bike Week manageable and, you know, not a lot of crowds and things like that. This kind of goes against it. I think what we could do is, to me, it would be like an everyday parking event there. Just like what's going to be down on Lakeside Ave as it is, first come, first serve, the parking spaces, you pay the kiosks. And to me, the beach should be the same way. That way there, I don't think you'll be overrun with either one. I believe they can still put 4 bikes in a parking space as long as the kiosk says that space was paid for. And then I think we could decide that whatever money's for that whole week come in those kiosks, we could divide it up or give it all or whatever. And they wouldn't even have to be there to spend the money to collect. So I think you know, we could save them money, let the beach manage itself as far as the kiosks being used. Like I said, 4 bikes could be in a parking space. The parking spaces are all lined. And then we could figure out a way to either divide the money or, like I said, give it all. But you got to remember too, is a community center up the street parks vehicles also. And they've been denied their permit. So what are we going to do with them? You know, are we going to make them whole? I don't think it's pretty obvious that this is not a normal year. So making people whole with what they used to make is going to be a tough thing to do because it's just not possible. What were you saying, Tony?
Well, I was just saying, we made the amendment that we were going to support the local nonprofit organizations. And with all the money that they bring in, it all comes right back to us. They
I
spend it.
don't say it doesn't. I don't say it doesn't. But what we're trying to do is hold back on the amount of people that are going to be congregating in one area. That's the whole
Yeah,
idea.
well,
And the other thing I think Scott needs to look into, if these big parking lots are going to park bikes or whatever, I think they need a permit to do that, but I'm not sure. So that needs to be looked at.
Well, I can't speak to the permit as far as the private lots parking. So so Bob, what you're suggesting, Councilor Hamel, is that the city run the whole parking operation and then have a plan ahead of time to split those proceeds in a fair and equitable way with the Weirs Action Committee. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. Just let the parking lot manage itself. The kiosks are used anyway. And then we could split the return somehow. And like I said, they do not have to hire people and spend, I don't know what they spend, $8,000-9,000 to pay somebody to be there to collect the money.
Okay, if you can hold on just a second here. City Manager would like to weigh in.
So I just did some quick back of the envelope math, and I think we've got 67 parking spaces down there that are paved and numbered. I rounded it up to 70. I said if half of those were car parking and they were charging $15 a day, that'd be $525 in revenue. If they were charging $5 per motorcycle and they got 4 motorcycles per space, as Councilor Hamel has said, that would be 35 spaces getting $20 a day, $700. There could be some turnover, I understand. So you might be looking, if they maximized $1,500 a day in the parking lot, if they got some turnover on there. That's ballpark of what we get in a day. And as Councilor Hamel said, with no labor. They do pay, I know the WAC is a volunteer committee, but they do pay people to work the parking lot. So they would be grossing anywhere, let's say from $1,200 to $1,500, but paying salaries out of that. And I think if the desire was to kind of make them whole and have an equitable split with what the city gets with no labor and the kiosks might generate, that might be the simpler approach to go this year if you're focused on it not being all motorcycles and not using the grassy area, which is, I think, how they then maximize and get to $30,000 over 10 days. I can tell you the city with cars and at $2 an hour never gets close to $30,000 a day in that parking lot because we're not parking cars on the grassy area when those 67 spaces are full. That's it. So there may be some merit into just letting the lot police itself with first come, first served. You don't have that visual of an overabundance of motorcycles parking, which, we don't need to be a lead news story. That all of a sudden, look at these motorcycles congregating in an area, in a time of a pandemic. So I'm just throwing that out with some, again, back of the envelope numbers, but there seems to be some merit to, if you want to go that route, having the lot just run itself.
So Scott, within short order after the conclusion, after the 30th of August, we'd know exactly what we generated from revenue from all of the kiosks.
Absolutely. It's a web-based program that I can look at every day and tell you exactly what Endicott Rock parking lot generated with those 2 kiosks that people pay when they park in that parking lot.
And as you said, we could instruct, we have an employee, no, we just monitor the gate. We don't collect money there.
We don't collect money at the gate,
Yeah.
but we would still, if the beach is open, we're still going to have to pay staff to be down there monitoring the beach and cleaning the bathhouses and making sure things are in supply and all of that stuff. Because, again, in a June motorcycle week, the bike's parked there, but nobody is going to the beach. We have no city staff down there per se. There's a whole row of porta potties that's down in that area and stuff to handle the crowd. We've got the bathhouse open and we will have people on the beach. So we will need some of our staff to facilitate that end of it as well.
So maybe, perhaps I missed this. My question is this: in order to get, if you have 1 kiosk for a parking spot, you have to have a monitor in the parking lot to get 4 motorcycles in there and collect the money at the time.
No, the motorcycles would just pay for their spot in the kiosk. And obviously, if 4 people came together, they would all park together. I'm not a biker, but I'm thinking if 2 bikes came in and parked in a parking spot, it's not likely that 2 other motorcycles are going to come in and piggyback on someone else's lined, numbered parking space. And I guess I will look to our biker on the council to confirm that somebody wouldn't go in and squeeze themselves in.
Well, you would hope not, but usually they do not. I mean, usually travel as a group, you park as a group. But it's like you say, I mean, if there's 4 bikes in that parking space, then that's like 1 car paying for that space.
Right. So at the end of the day, if there's money in the meter, there's money in the kiosk, and on our enforcement end, that's a paid spot, whether they've got 1 motorcycle parked in there or there's 4 parked in there. It's an hourly rate versus a flat rate to come in and park at the gate. But again, I think with the WAC having to pay some labor out of that, which they've historically done, and as I mentioned, it was about $9,000 in labor on a $30,000 gross last year. They obviously can say they could cut that way back and not need that many people if they're only limited to the paved parking area. But even, cut that in half if it's a $3,000 or $4,000 expenditure for labor over 10 days. That's eating into a substantially less gross revenue number if you're limiting them just to the paved area.
I think that's a good point. If that variable expense is consistent year to year, they still may incur that same amount of labor expense on gross revenues being significantly lower.
Can I ask a
less.
quick question, Mayor?
Yeah, yes, Councilor Hamel.
Thank you. I'm going to roll a hand grenade across the desk, but is it possible we could raise the cost of those spaces down at the beach for that 10 days, just there?
That goes into reprogramming, and every time we do that, whether we try to turn the kiosk off or fireworks night or do different things, there's a charge to that. So you're better off just keeping it simple.
Okay.
I know. And again, if it's cars going there, why are we going to hit cars more in that particular week? They came the week before and they parked and it was $2 an hour. Now, we've got temporary price increases. So if there's a desire to support, I would say keep it simple. Let the lot run itself, and we can figure out an equitable way once we get the numbers into us.
Okay, I agree.
Councilor Haynes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're missing the point. This is about public safety. I understand the Weirs Action Committee is having a fundraiser. I understand that. A lot of other people have had fundraisers. This is about public safety, and this is about people congregating. I could support Councilor Hamel's idea, but not this year, as far as the Endicott parking lot. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Haynes, would you explain again? So you could support the original motion, or?
No, I could support the fact that we could make the Weirs Action Committee whole, or what we can perceive of making them whole, and just let the lot run itself.
Okay. All right.
I think Councilman Susi wanted.
Councilor Felch, I'll get them next.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've already got a motion and a second. I'd like to move the question forward unless Councilor Cheney would like to withdraw his motion.
No, but I'd like to give Councilor Susi a chance.
Yep.
I'd be happy to acknowledge Councilor Susi. Thank you, Councilor Cheney. Go right ahead.
But if somebody parks at the Weirs or parks down at the beach, if they get a kiosk and they're supposed to be there for an X amount of hours, we enforce that if they're not, they get some kind of a fine or something like that? I'm trying to understand that.
Yes, it's just like an expired meter. So our enforcement folks have a tablet or an iPad, and they walk along, and any numbered space that doesn't have money paid for that space has a red light on it. And they come to that space and they look, and if there's a car there and they've got a red light, it basically is the same as your meter's expired and we would write a parking ticket. But again, after a question a couple of weeks ago, we only ticket one motorcycle, even if there are 4 in the space.
Yeah, I saw that, but if I may ask, what is the fine?
The parking fine is $15 at this point. I think the council raised that in the last year or so when we looked at parking on sidewalks and other infractions like that. So it's $15 for an expired meter or kiosk.
Thank you.
Thank you. So without further discussion, we have a motion and a second, and I would ask the clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie,
Yes.
Counselor Littman,
No.
Counselor Haynes,
No.
Counselor Hamel,
You're muted.
No.
Counselor Felch.
Yes.
Three yeas and 3 nays. I didn't anticipate voting on this tonight, but I
It's another option, Mayor.
yeah, I think I'm looking for a compromise on this to move forward. And there's one question I have here. Forgive me for being really slow on this. But if someone parks one motorcycle in a full-size parking spot and they take it for 2 hours, how much will that cost? A couple of bucks?
In the beach parking lot, it's $2 an hour for a spot. So whether there was one motorcycle in there or 4 motorcycles in there, it's $2 an hour. On Lakeside Avenue, parking is $1 an hour.
So if I were managing that parking lot, I would want to put 4 motorcycles into each full-size spot and take a flat fee from them, and I think generate more revenue as opposed to just saying, well, one average size motorcycle parks in that lot and takes it for 2 hours and we make $4. It just seems to me if we put 3 more bikes in there and charge them $20, we're ahead of the game there and hoping that you're going to get some turnover. We're going to be able to generate some more revenue here.
So
So in some respects, I would like to have I would like to figure out a way. I think that $9,000 in expenses to run that lot over the course of 10 days is extraordinarily high. But I would like to think that if the city were be willing to manage that lot for that 10-day period and put 4 bikes in each space, and then that revenue generated would go to the Weirs Action Committee. I just think we can hold the expenses down, maximize the opportunities there for space, and they can get close to being where they need to be, them being the WAC.
So I don't disagree with that. And I think as Councilor Hamel had pointed out, not everybody travels in 4s. So you might have 2 bikes that come and they want to park 2 bikes in a parking spot. And that's what you're going to yield out of that spot. If somebody came by themselves and wanted to park it, I wouldn't want to put city staff who have no experience, we have no insurance down there all of a sudden running a motorcycle parking lot. So if that was the approach you wanted to go, turn it over to the Weirs Action Committee and let them pay staff and manage it and do it that way. I think the simpler way is first come, first served, pay at the kiosk. We know what we average on a weekday and a weekend in there, and there's 0 labor to anybody.
Okay, so my vote is yes in support of the motion.
So can I just have clarification that the requirement would be, and I'm just going to throw out numbers here. We said it had to be first come, first served for cars and or motorcycles.
Right.
So in other words, if 70 cars all showed up first thing in the morning to go to the beach and 70 cars parked 1 car to a spot, there might be 0 motorcycles in there.
That's right.
Okay. And then we're not doing any parking other than what's in a traditional numbered spot right now, because if we do have cars down there, we need to be able to keep a fire lane, and vehicles that size need to be able to traverse the parking lot to get out.
I would say no parking on the grass.
Okay. So, but numbered spots only, parking in the
Numbered spots only, and I would probably take a look at not even doing all 67 spots there.
And then my final question would be, generally speaking, during motorcycle week, it's $5 a bike, and there's always signs out that say don't pay more than $5 a bike to park. So I'm assuming that's the motorcycle charge. What would we want to put at a price point for the Weirs Action Committee to be charging for cars?
They usually charge 20.
I would say $20 per car and $5 per motorcycle.
I'm just looking for clarification.
Yeah,
So when
no,
we-
absolutely.
When we
Sure,
write
sure.
this up, it's black and white, and then they operate the lot for the full days from the first Saturday of motorcycle week, which is the 22nd
Second.
Through the 30th.
Following Sunday.
Now I want to talk about the capacity of the lot, as you say, 67 spaces.
I believe that to be the number. I'm probably within a couple, but I believe it's 67.
Well, I think we need to have a discussion about, are we going to maximize the spaces there and create the possibility of poor optics and potential social gathering? I don't know.
Well, I think if it's,
Or should we limit the number of spaces there? And I'd look to you, this is your motion, Councilor Cheney, for your thoughts on this. I don't want to pick a number out of the air. I mean, this is your motion. I'd like, it's passed now. What do we do?
same as Lakeside Ave. You're muted.
I guess what I'd like to suggest is that we ask the manager to give us a suggestion and work from there.
So I'm happy to do that, and I would request the manager take a look at that and think about the capacity of somewhere between 50% and 2/3. Right, capacity.
I will do that. And I think what I'm also hearing is we don't want all motorcycles to be in one portion just for the optics. If somebody wanted to stand there and snap one photo and show 60 bikes all being in the one place and saying, look at the crowd at Motorcycle Week. I mean, I think that's part of what we're trying to avoid with limiting capacity. So maybe the blend of spaces is not just all motorcycles on one side and all cars on another side. But again, if all cars came in and filled it up on a weekday morning, you know, it could be 0 motorcycles in there on any given day. It could be all motorcycles in there on any given day, I guess, as well, depending on who arrives first. But am I hearing that we want to do somewhere between 50 and 75% occupancy? So if 67 spaces was the number, that we will limit parking to no more than 50 spaces?
Are we
It's
limiting parking? on
a bit
Lakeside?
arbitrary, but
We're not limiting parking on Lakeside Ave. Why is it different?
excellent point, Councilor Couch.
And they're going to be taking pictures of Lakeside Ave with all those motorcycles. So the parking area will probably be the least of our problems. And I'm sure I may be the only one here who is slightly offended by this, but to think that we're going to give the nomads a place on the boardwalk, but we're going to worry about the optics of the Weirs Action Committee parking cars or motorcycles, it strikes me as difficult to swallow. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think we have to limit the number of parking spaces if we're not going to do it anywhere else.
I would agree with Tony.
So I think maybe my last question, again, just trying to cover all the bases here of, again, if it is a mixed use of cars and motorcycles, what time in the morning do we expect the lot to be manned? Because some people do get down there to go to the beach at 7:30, 8, 8:30, especially on the weekend days, to make sure they get a good spot on the beach. So again, I'm trying to look through some of the challenges of this happening in August. in mixed cars and motorcycles. So do we want to say that they need to be, the gate is, I mean, otherwise the gate's unlocked and somebody drives in and is already parked. And then are they chasing someone on the beach for money at that point? I'm just trying to think through again.
But wouldn't that person have to have used the kiosk?
The kiosk, we don't start charging until 10 o'clock in the morning. So at some point, somebody would come back, maybe 9 o'clock in the morning, either 9 or 10, but people are, the beach opens at 7. So plenty of people come down at 7 and they don't have to feed the meter at 7 o'clock.
Yep.
And I'm drawing a blank. I think it's 9 o'clock we start and it runs till 10 o'clock at night, if I'm not mistaken.
It's
So,
7 o'clock in the morning, they're out.
Again, people show up to get a spot on the beach early, especially in this day and age where we've limited capacity. So do we want to put a stipulation that the beach needs to be opened if they're charging?
So they can close the gate at quitting time at night, right?
Sure. But I'm saying, do we want to make sure that there's someone there at 9 o'clock, that gate is open?
Yep.
It doesn't need to be earlier
Okay.
than 9 o'clock.
I would think earlier than 9 o'clock.
I mean, I would think it'd be something along the lines of 7 a.m. myself, but just, we know what it's like if we get a scorcher of a day and it's a Saturday or Sunday, people are down there by 7 o'clock getting ready to get in there, right? If they're not already on the beach. So
I've driven by
So
there.
just thinking further, by the time we kind of memorialize this in writing and I bring it to the WAC and fully intend to do, if they say those numbers aren't going to work for us or staffing and whatever, and it reverts back, then it would just be regular city operations, which still would not preclude us from looking to have the lot manage itself and work out some kind of an agreement with them after the fact.
Yep.
Sure.
Okay.
yes. Okay. When's our next meeting, Scott? What's the date? The 24th.
24th.
Okay. All right. So when you get this memorialized, would you share it with the council? Thank you very much. Okay. Moving along to council comments under 22. Any councilor comments tonight? Councilor Felch, I see you are unmuted. Do you have?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Councilor Cheney?
Nope.
Fair enough. Very good. Seeing no councilor comments this evening, I would like to declare this meeting of the City Council adjourned at 8:27 and 51 seconds.